The plane touched down in the capital city, but the real storm was just beginning. Outside, rows of black SUVs and armed soldiers stood at attention, waiting. Inside the cabin, the flight attendant, Claire, felt her stomach drop as she peered out the window. "What is happening?" she whispered. The French CEO beside her smirked, adjusting his tie. "Must be for me," he said confidently. But then, the cabin door opened. A tall officer in a black beret marched in, his boots echoing like thunder. Every passenger held their breath as he walked straight to seat 2A, the seat of the quiet man in the hoodie. The officer snapped a sharp salute. "Mr. President," he announced, "welcome home." Claire's face turned white. The CEO's smirk vanished. The man they had tried to push into economy class slowly stood up, his calm eyes locking onto theirs. The sun had just risen over the airport when President Malik Johnson arrived. He moved like any other traveler. No fancy suit, no bodyguards, no flashing lights. Just a simple hoodie and a small bag. He preferred it this way. To him, leadership wasn't about showing off. It was about staying connected to his people. After a long diplomatic trip, all he wanted was to get home. He greeted the airport staff with a warm smile, boarded the plane quietly, and took his seat in business class. No one recognized him. No one cared. But a few rows behind him, trouble was brewing. A wealthy French businessman, Pierre Laurent, had arrived late. He was used to getting whatever he wanted: first-class treatment, VIP service, red carpets. But today, business class was full. Pierre didn't like being told no. He demanded an upgrade, his voice sharp with entitlement. The airline staff scrambled, whispering nervously. That's when Claire, the senior flight attendant, stepped in. She scanned the cabin, her eyes stopping on Malik. No expensive watch, no assistant, just a black man in a hoodie. She walked over, her smile tight. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Malik handed it to her without a word. She checked it, then hesitated. "We need to move you to economy," she said. "We'll compensate you." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" Claire's smile faltered. "Just a small adjustment for another passenger." Malik leaned back. "Number, I'll stay in my seat." Claire stiffened. No one ever refused her, especially not someone like him. She stormed off, whispering under her breath. Meanwhile, Pierre was finally allowed on board. Claire greeted him like royalty, offering champagne and warm towels. She ignored Malik completely, as if he didn't exist. The plane took off, but the tension in the air was thicker than the clouds outside. The plane soared through the sky, but the real turbulence was just beginning inside the cabin. Claire avoided looking at Malik, but she could feel his presence like a shadow. Every time she walked past his seat, her hands trembled slightly. She focused instead on Pierre, laughing at his jokes, refilling his champagne glass, pretending everything was normal. But whispers had started spreading. A woman in the row behind Malik leaned over to her neighbor. "That's President Johnson," she murmured. "They don't even know who they're disrespecting." The neighbor's eyes widened, but they stayed silent. No one dared to say anything, not yet. Malik remained calm, staring out the window at the clouds. He wasn't angry. He was waiting. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the captain received a radio transmission from air traffic control. "Be advised, VIP military escort awaiting your arrival. Repeat, VIP military escort." The captain frowned. "Who's the VIP?" The co-pilot checked the manifest. No dignitaries listed, just regular passengers and... His voice cut off as his eyes landed on one name. Malik Johnson, President of the Republic. The captain's face drained of color. Oh no. Back in the cabin, Pierre was holding court, bragging about his business deals in Africa. "These countries need us," he told Claire loudly. "Without our investments, they'd still be in the dark ages." Claire nodded along, but her smile was stiff. She glanced nervously at Malik. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, but something about his silence was terrifying. Then the seatbelt sign dinged. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please return to your seats. As the plane tilted downward, Claire made one last mistake. She walked up to Malik and, without meeting his eyes, said, "Sir, you'll need to stow your bag properly." Malik slowly turned his head. His voice was quiet, but sharp. "Is that an order?" Claire swallowed hard. "It's procedure." Malik held her gaze for a long moment before finally placing his bag under the seat. But the message was clear. This wasn't over. Outside, the runway lights of the capital glittered in the dusk. But what awaited them was far from a normal landing. As the wheels touched down, passengers gasped. Rows of armed soldiers stood at attention. Black government vehicles lined the tarmac. And at the front, the Minister of Defense himself waited, his face grim. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Pierre's smug smile flickered. The plane rolled to a stop. The doors opened. And then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. A soldier in full uniform marched down the aisle, stopping directly in front of Malik's seat. He snapped a salute. "Mr. President," he announced, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "we are ready for your orders." Silence. Then Malik stood. A single drop of sweat slid down Claire's temple as President Malik Johnson rose from his seat. The entire cabin had gone deathly silent. Even Pierre had stopped breathing for a moment. Malik adjusted his hoodie slightly before turning to face the soldier. "At ease, Captain," he said calmly. Then, without raising his voice, he added, "Detain these two." His finger pointed, first at Claire, then at Pierre. Gasps rippled through the plane. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. "Well, wait, there's been a mistake." Pierre, ever arrogant, scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am?" The soldier didn't blink. "Yes, you're the man who insulted the President of the Republic." Two more armed guards stepped forward, handcuffs glinting in the cabin lights. On the tarmac, cameras flashed. News crews had gathered, tipped off about the unfolding drama. The Minister of Defense stepped forward, shaking Malik's hand firmly. "Welcome home, sir." Malik gave a small nod. "Let's handle this with dignity." But dignity was the last thing on Pierre's mind as he was marched off the plane, his designer shoes scuffing against the stairs. "You can't do this. I have connections. The French embassy will hear about—" A guard cut him off. "They already know. They've been instructed not to interfere." Claire, now sobbing, turned to Malik. "I didn't know it was you. I was just doing my job." Malik paused, then looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Would it have been acceptable if I wasn't the president?" She had no answer. Inside the terminal, Malik addressed the press briefly. "In our country, we respect all people, not just those with power." Then he walked away, leaving the storm behind him. But the storm was only beginning. By nightfall, videos of the incident had gone viral. Hashtags like Respect Africa and Justice for Johnson trended worldwide. Air France's stock plummeted. The French government scrambled to distance itself from Pierre, calling his behavior unacceptable. And in a small detention cell, Claire sat with her head in her hands, realizing too late the cost of her prejudice. The morning sun burned hot over the capital, but the heat in the courtroom was even fiercer. Claire sat stiffly in the defendant's chair, her Air France uniform wrinkled, her face pale. Across from her, Pierre tugged at his collar, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous sweat. Reporters packed the benches, cameras flashing as the judge entered. The charges were read aloud: disrespect to a head of state, racial discrimination, abuse of authority. Pierre's lawyer stood first. "My client had no idea he was addressing the president. This is a simple misunderstanding." The prosecutor didn't smile. "Your client demanded a black man give up his seat. President or not, that's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern." Then came Claire's turn. Her voice shook. "I was following airline protocol." The judge leaned forward. "Protocol doesn't require you to humiliate passengers based on their skin color." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Meanwhile, in his office, President Malik reviewed the case files without expression. His advisor hesitated. "Sir, the French ambassador is requesting leniency. They're offering new trade deals if we drop the charges. Malik set down his pen. Tell them justice isn't for sale. Outside the courthouse, thousands had gathered. Some waved signs supporting Malik. Others chanted for equality. A young girl held up a handwritten poster. Teach them a lesson, Mr. President. Inside his car, Malik saw the sign and sighed. He hadn't wanted this spectacle, but sometimes the world needed a reminder. A hush fell over the courtroom as the prosecutor stood, holding up a small flash drive. Your Honor, we have new evidence. The full, unedited cabin footage from Air France. The screen flickered to life. There was Claire, whispering to a flight attendant, "Just move one of the black passengers. They won't complain." Pierre's voice boomed next. "If they refuse, cancel their ticket." "I own mines here. They work for people like me," gasps erupted. Claire covered her face. Pierre lunged toward the screen. Before guards restrained him, the judge's gavel cracked like thunder. This court has seen enough. That evening, Malik sat alone in the palace gardens when his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You've won the battle, but we control the gold. Release our man or your economy collapses." Malik's fingers tightened around the phone. This wasn't just about prejudice anymore. This was war. The palace lights burned late into the night as President Malik assembled his war council. General Diallo slammed a fist on the map-covered table. "They think they can threaten us? Let's seize their minds." But Malik remained still, staring at the anonymous message. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Prepare my speech, and bring me Pierre Laurent." At dawn, the nation watched as Malik addressed a sea of cameras, his voice calm but edged with steel. "To those who believe Africa kneels to threats, meet me at the negotiation table tomorrow. Bring your contracts, bring your lawyers," he paused, "and bring your courage." The screen cut to Pierre in handcuffs, being loaded onto a military helicopter. The message was clear. Malik wasn't backing down. He was escalating. That afternoon, workers at French-owned mines found the gates chained shut, armed soldiers standing guard. Stock markets plunged. In Paris, emergency meetings were called. And in a hidden villa, a group of powerful men watched the news, their champagne glasses untouched. One whispered, "We underestimated him." The negotiation room hummed with tension as French executives sat across from President Malik and his ministers. Pierre Laurent, still in custody, sat slumped in a corner, a living bargaining chip. The lead French negotiator slid a document across the table. "Sign this, and we restore all mining operations. Refuse, and every Western investor pulls out of your country by sunrise." Malik didn't touch the paper. Instead, he nodded to his aide, who activated the conference screen. Footage played showing French executives bribing local officials. Video Malik's intelligence team had secretly gathered for months. "Your move," Malik said quietly. Outside, protesters surrounded the French embassy. Across Africa, leaders announced support for Malik. The hashtag #African Spring trended globally. In a desperate play, the French president called Malik directly. "You're making a dangerous enemy." Malik's reply made headlines. "We stopped fearing colonial masters long ago." At midnight, the French corporation signed Malik's terms. Immediate transfer of 3 major mines to Burkina Faso. Control $500 million in reparations for decades of exploited labor. Pierre Laurent to face trial on African soil. As the documents were inked, Malik received one final text. "This isn't over." He deleted it without reply. The Supreme Court chamber was packed to bursting on the day of Pierre Laurent's sentencing. International media crews jostled for space between Malian dignitaries and local miners still in their work boots. A hush fell as the judges entered, but all eyes kept darting to the empty seat reserved for President Malik. Then, at precisely 9 a.m., the back doors swung open. Malik walked in, not in his presidential suit, but in the same hoodie he'd worn on that fateful flight. The message was deafening. This was never about me. The Chief Justice stood. "Pierre Laurent, for economic exploitation spanning a decade, and for your actions aboard Flight 221, this court sentences you to 15 years in a Burkina Faso prison." Pierre screamed as guards led him away. You can't do this to a French citizen. Malik finally spoke, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. Africa is no longer your courtroom. We are the judges now.